Hello and welcome to Beyond the To-Do List, the show where we talk to the people behind the productivity. I'm your host, Erik Fisher. This week, I'm talking with a fellow productivity podcaster, Laura Mcclellan of The Productive Woman. We're going to talk about tips and tricks and tools and how she got into productivity and what her approach is, and that's going to be awesome. It's always cool to geek out with productivity with a fellow productivity person as well as a fellow productivity podcaster. Before we get into that, I want to say thank you to FreshBooks for supporting this episode of Beyond the To-Do List. FreshBooks has an awesome all-new version of their cloud accounting software. It's been redesigned from the ground up and custom built for how you work. With FreshBooks, it's ridiculously easy to create and send professional-looking invoices in less than 30 seconds. You can set up online payments with just a couple of clicks and get paid up to 4 days faster. And what's cool is you can actually see when a client has seen your invoice so that you're not guessing whether they've seen it yet or not. And you can then do a quick follow-up, within reason. It doesn't take all the awkwardness away, but it takes a lot of it away, trust me. FreshBooks is offering a free 30-day unrestricted trial to my listeners. To claim it, go to freshbooks.com/todo and enter Beyond the To-Do List in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/TODO and enter Beyond the To-Do List in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Grab that 30-day free trial, send those invoices that you've been meaning to send, and get paid. All right, enjoy this conversation with Laura Mcclellan. Well, this week it is my privilege to welcome the host of The Productive Woman, Laura Mcclellan, and fellow network podcast co-host. I don't know if there's a better way to say that, but her show, The Productive Woman, is also on the Noodle Mix Network. So, welcome to the show, Laura.
Well, thanks, Erik. I am honored and delighted to be here.
So, The Productive Woman, for people who have not checked it out, you don't run that as if you are the productive woman, although I know you are a very productive woman. You run it from the perspective of you're not the expert, you're not interviewing experts, although you have guests on the show. What is the purpose of the show? What's the workflow of the show? You've been doing it now for how long?
2 years, a little over 2 years. So, and I mean, that's the interesting thing. I'm so glad you didn't introduce me as the productive woman because people do that periodically. And I host a show called The Productive Woman. I don't consider myself the productive woman, but the purpose of the show always has been exactly what I say at the beginning of every episode. My goal is to provide the listeners with the tools and encouragement they need to accomplish the things they care about and make a life that matters. So that's the sole purpose for that podcast.
Right. And you've been doing that now for almost 2 years, which is crazy. I've been doing this for almost 4. And again, people look to me as being a productivity expert. It's just that I've earned that, so to speak, from talking to all these productivity experts. So I think you get a little bit of that rubbed off on yourself too now, Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I've been doing it for so long, and before that, I've always been kind of a productivity nerd, I guess. Clear back into middle school, I liked reading books about time management and coming up with calendars and charts and checklists and stuff. So I've certainly been studying it for a long time and trying to implement it in my life. But when you talk to lots of people about productivity, I guess you sort of get that designation as knowing something about it. Yeah. So you were interested in productivity, or I don't even know if it was really called that. It was kind of, I think it was somewhere in the 90s, late 90s, where the word productivity started to become the commonplace, the placeholder for all of those kinds of things like time management and organization and things like that. But you were interested in this even way back then?
Yeah, even before that, you're absolutely right. We didn't think of it as productivity. It was time management or organization.
Those two things are part of productivity, but we've kind of come a long way. What is your definition, or how do you describe to somebody when someone asks, "Hey, I do a show about productivity," how do you describe that to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. There certainly are lots of components of it. And the ones that people think of are the time management kinds of things or the organization kinds of things. But to me, and I think when I started the show, I still thought of it in that way, that productivity was about, checking things off your to-do list. But as, your show, Beyond the To-Do List, acknowledges it's so much more than that. And when I think over the course of the 2 years I've been doing this, my definition has evolved. And when someone asks me, what does it mean to be productive? The answer I give them is it means being able to order your life in such a way as to maximize your positive impact on the world around you. And whether that's the world at large or, the world inside the four walls of your home, it's all about identifying the things that matter to you, getting those things done, and making sure that you have time in your life to do the things that matter most to you and to have a positive impact on the world.
I hear a thread of intentionality coming through in that description. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, that has become such a thing. Lots of people talk about it, and maybe as part of the research I've done over especially the last year or so for the show, it has come up more and more. And I think as I get older, it becomes more and more important to me to be intentional about what I'm doing. I think it's such a key component to living a meaningfully productive life, to do things on purpose and not just by default.
All right, so I'm going to go to the controversial section of this conversation. The title of your show is The Productive Woman. Are only women listening to your show, or is your show only for women?
No and no.
The
title was really almost an accident. Before I started the podcast, like six or 7 months before, I had started thinking about doing it, and I took Cliff Ravenscraft's online podcasting A to Z course. I know you know him and
yes,
have worked with him. And I think that's where I first learned about you and your podcast, was from listening to his. But for those who've gone through that course, you know that the first assignment is to give him some information about the show you have in mind, including a title. And I had to come up with something. And so I threw it out there. And I actually, when I sent him the assignment, I said, this is the title. It's not a very good title. I'll come up with something better later. But it just stuck. But I know for a fact that there are lots of men who listen. I hear from them. I get feedback from them. And they are more than welcome. We don't talk about girl things on the show.
But here's the thing. I think, well, it would be foolish of me to say that men and women aren't different. And so I think one of the strengths that maybe you have coming through here is there's not a lot of female podcasters that are talking about productivity or have a show specifically about productivity, let alone the fact that there's very few productivity podcasts in general. So you're approaching it from a female perspective, and let's talk about this. Like, what is the difference? I mean, there's no just, well, men see it this way and women see it this way. And if I had to venture a guess, I would say maybe it comes down to the dishwasher. And what I mean by that is we don't have a dishwasher now. We used to. The place we have now doesn't have one. But the way it used to be is I would load it and it was loaded enough or loaded well enough or it was done. My wife, however, had a specific way that it had to be loaded that was optimized. And that right there is kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I've been asked more than once, why a podcast called The Productive Woman? What is the difference? And I think you and I would agree that the principles of productivity are the same across the board. But I think women's experience of things related to productivity is different. And, our mutual friend Mike Vardy and I had a conversation about this, last year maybe. This is my theory, and I'm still I'm open to discussion about this, but I think there's a commonality among women that there is a right way to do things, and that we often feel like whatever it is we're doing it not quite right. And And I don't think men think about it in those terms, at least, and I hate to generalize because there, of course,
Right.
are exceptions to every rule, but men seem to tend to think, you know what, if it's working for me, it's good, it's fine. And women seem to have this imposter syndrome in a way that not so many men suffer from. And so a lot of my show ends up being exploring that because I suffer from it, and having conversations with my guests and with listeners about the fact that, you know what, you're doing it fine. If it's working for you, it's fine.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I mean, I've talked to I don't know how many people now over the course of 4 years, and it always comes down to, for me, there's no one right way to do it.
Right.
I think that describes it to a T right there. Is like there are principles. How much of the principle or how much of applying a certain principle to your workflow, your life, etc., how much that impacts it is fine. But if it's only a 20% or 30% and you still do it, and it makes some impact, that's great. Or try this other thing. And I know that sounds a lot like the whole, hey, try this app. No, try this app. Which app works best for you? Well, I don't know. I don't know you. Let's talk about that.
Which is the right to-do list? What's the best to-do app? Exactly. We all hear those questions.
Yeah. But I kind of tend to fall on the side of there is no one right way that things get done, because everybody's different. Everybody has different roles, different expectations, different agreements that they've made, and different seasons of life for that matter.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's never going to, one system or one perspective is never going to work for every single person across the populace right now. It's always going to change. And hence, that's why I keep doing the show.
Yeah, you would think. I have to say that when I first launched the show, I wondered if I would have enough things to talk about to keep it going. And, watching you, especially watching people like you and Mike and the other people that talk about these things, there was, it's become clear that there is an endless variety of ways of looking at these things and of things that we can talk about, because not just different jobs and different roles and all the things you talked about, but different personalities and different learning styles and different working styles. All that comes into what's going to work or not work for an individual person.
Yes, exactly. And there's even things that again, that have worked for me at one point, don't work for me anymore, may come back into, or I know this for a fact, I've readopted some things that I had let go of a long time ago, and then those worked for me again. And I think we're talking about not just the difference between, men and women, but also productivity styles, learning styles, like you mentioned.
Yes.
So you are not only a woman, but you're a lawyer, and that is a whole other thing. Like I honestly can't even get into that. And actually, one of the other shows that the productivity show, I guess it's not necessarily a productivity show, but it is a Mac show, and the Mac power users show where. Yeah. Are they both lawyers or just one of them?
They're both lawyers.
They're both lawyers.
It is my favorite podcast of all time. It hits every geeky trigger for me because it's two lawyers on, opposite coasts of the country, a man and a woman, and they're talking about, just geeky tech tools and Mac stuff. And I'm a Mac fan girl, and I've spent so much money because of those two.
Thank you, David Sparks. And David's been on the show twice before, so I've not had, I forget her name. Jeez.
Katie. Katie's been on my show, and she's awesome. I love the dynamic between those two because they'd come at it from very different perspectives, but they both bring something really unique to the conversation about all this stuff that they talk about.
Yeah, I'll make sure to link up the episodes from David and Katie that I've done and you've done in the show notes for this episode, as well as their show.
Yeah.
But you have this unique thing where you're doing the podcast outside of your day job, your lawyer position. Yeah. And when you enter into that position, it's almost, I envision it, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I see it as almost like it's a silo where you walk into that and everything about that position stays there. Although I know you do work outside of the office too.
Yeah.
But what's the setup like there? Like, how do you, as much as you're legally able to tell us, how does your day job setup get put in perspective here?
Well, I mean, I work at an office. I'm a lawyer, a real estate lawyer in the Dallas office of a very large international law firm. And so I go in, I have my routines in the morning. I'm very much into setting up routines because I don't have to think about what I'm doing next. And so I have my kind of rituals that I do when I get to the office. I have the geekiest law office setup of anybody at my firm because I have 3 big computer screens on my desk. I use them for very specific things to get my work done. And I have to remain productive there because I have client needs that I have to tend to. I have administrative things I have to do. I have training of the associate that works with me and, just the ongoing legal education. But, I have my project list that I work from. I have constant battle to not let email take over my life because so much of what I do is via email. So I'm not sure what specifically you want to know about how it works there, but it's long days and a lot of things that need to get done. And it's part of why I launched the podcast. Actually, I wanted to do something that was not related to my law practice. Mm-hmm. And this was just something fun to do.
Now, I know you're a Mac enthusiast, but I'm assuming you don't get to use your Mac stuff at your day job.
No, I don't.
And how do you make that work?
Yeah, I've had to try different things over time because we have to use a Windows-based PC. It's a laptop, and I don't love it, but it's just that's how we have to work. And so I have my calendar. Because I live and die by my calendar. Every event, every commitment I make that's time specific has to go into my calendar, and I have alerts set up to ding at me. And, the joke in my office is when my calendar dings at me, I get up and go where it tells me to go. And if it doesn't ding, I'm not going anywhere because I'm head down trying to get, documents drafted or whatever. But that syncs across to my iPhone and my iPad, so wherever I am, I can see what my commitments are, and because I feed everything into the calendars that I have on my phone and my iPad, I can see both my personal and professional appointments and things there. I had to struggle to find a task manager that was going to work for me because I've been using OmniFocus for several years. But I can't use that on my Windows-based PC. And so I discovered Nosby and have liked that a lot because I can use it on both platforms and see my projects and tasks no matter where I am. So
yeah, it's one of the reasons I like it too, although I don't have any reason to switch over from any of my Mac. I am all Mac through and through, and it's just because that's where I've migrated to and it works best for me. And yeah. I can't imagine going back because, honestly, I'm lost when my wife, who has a work laptop, and it's like Windows 7 or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's one of those Windows that's past where I used to know what to do, and it's like I don't know how to help you here anymore. Sorry. Here, let's crack open the home old MacBook, and you can log into your email there, and then I can help you. So
yeah, one of the happiest days of my this year was the day when Smile Software finally released the beta for Text Expander on PCs, because I use Text Expander all the time on my Mac and my iOS devices, but I couldn't use it at the office. And I would find myself typing, and the muscle memory is being what it is. I'd type out my snippets, and it's like, wait, it doesn't expand. But because as a lawyer, our computers are very locked down. I can't put any software on the work computer without getting the IT guys involved. And I had to go through all this rigmarole to get approval for it, to explain to them what it was and why I needed it. And then finally to get it loaded onto my computer and the security settings changed so that it could work, because, it kind of interfaces with the operating system to be able to work in all the different apps. But literally, Erik, it was so, it was kind of embarrassing because I am such a geek about this kind of stuff. The first time I was able to type a snippet on my work PC and it expanded, I laughed out loud and did a little happy dance. I was so happy because It's just such a huge time saver for me.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, and I had what's his name, Greg Scoins. I forget. I'm forgetting how to say his name, but the head of Text Expander. And this is back before they had switched over to the new version that they have now that is cross-platform and subscription-based. But still, the same fundamentals are there. And we walked through it, and it was just like, this is a no-brainer, people. Like, it does save you time. I've even kind of done an overhaul of my Text Expander snippets in the past month, and I'm still kind of adding new ones in now that I'm more aware of. It's a system. It's a not an amoeba, but what's the word? Like I don't know, free flowing. Anyway, it's a system that changes over time. So.
Well, yeah, and you learn new ways to use it. I don't know why anybody wouldn't try Text Expander, or there are some other alternatives. I just don't know what they are. I had Maya Olson from Smile on my show earlier this year, and she kind of hinted, this was like in April, I think, and she kind of hinted that something was happening, but she couldn't tell me. And it was, I think the episode actually came out like the week after they had announced it and released it. I'm like, Maya, how could you not tell me?
Yeah, at least offline. Like,
yeah.
But I like it. Awesome. I have since upgraded to the new system and all of that. And I just think, you know what? Like, I'm locked in at a lower price ongoing. I don't care. I'm going to do the annual plan. It for me, and I think I even talked about this with like Steve Dotto and Mike Vardy at one point on our old like weekly blab show. I said, look, every time they came out with a new version, I upgraded. And it was always through upgrade pricing. And what it came down to was about 40 something every time. And it was every other year or so. And this is basically on par with that. So there's no difference. Like, now they're at least getting money consistently. That's a good thing. Let's do this. So
yeah, I have to admit that when they first announced that it was going to a subscription, model, I kind of objected just because I didn't need the team feature of it. But B, you can get sort of overloaded with subscriptions and end up paying, several $100s a year when they add up. But I did eventually switch over to it, and you're absolutely right, especially when they announced what they were doing for the longtime users and that locked in the grandfather price, so to speak.
I mean, they flubbed the PR a bit when they first did it, but whatever. They
dealt with it. They were nimble enough to recognize what the issues were, and they're such a great company.
They are,
and I liked them all along. I wasn't mad at anybody. I just I wasn't sure it was going to work for me, and I think I let them know that, but. Yeah. But I since switched over to that model, and I love how it syncs, and I'm constantly finding new snippets to make my life easier. And it's just one of those apps that I use all the time.
Yeah. So you like Nosby, you like Text Expander. What else are some of your favorite tools?
As far as software kinds of things, I love VisiCal. That's what I use for my calendar.
Too.
Yeah, I just like the look of it better than the native Apple calendar. All the usual suspects. I couldn't function without Dropbox. I use Evernote a lot. That's kind of my external digital brain. I'm loving this. This is sort of a silly thing, but when you do a podcast and you have to do you do posts and you want to do some social media to let people know, I've been using Adobe Spark Post to create those because I am artistically challenged, and that's putting it kindly. And it's just I had used Canva before, but what I love about Adobe Spark is it lets you create an image specific size, whether it's for Facebook or whatever, and then with the click of a button, it'll change, resize it for Pinterest or resize it for Twitter. And so I can get it done very quickly, and they have all these tools within the app that make it easy for me to make them look pretty decent. I still can mess them up because I really am artistically challenged. But for the most part, they make it pretty easy to, put colors together that work and fonts and all that kind of stuff that I struggle with. And so
I've played with that a bit. It's got some pretty good guardrails in there, so you can't mess it up too much,
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm going to have to try that out a little bit more. I haven't been doing much in terms of artwork for the show because I typically throw the picture of the person, whoever's been on the show, in the post, and that's good enough for me,
Yeah, and it's easier for me for the episodes when I do have a guest, because obviously that's the key image that I'm dealing with. But it's fun to have tools to kind of play around with. I'm trying to think what else. I'm looking on the dock on my computer and on my phone to see what other tools I use. As far as task managers, I have played around with Todoist as well. Mm-hmm. My justification for trying these different things is, well, I have to talk, research them for my listeners, but I just like playing with them. So those are, some of the ones that I really love and use all the time. I use PDF Pen for dealing with PDF. I have the Pro. I upgraded to Pro like 2 years ago and have stuck with that. It's just so great for dealing with PDFs, which as a lawyer I have to do all the time. And we have Adobe on our work PC, but honestly, when I need to really do something, I send it over to my Mac, because I always have my MacBook Pro sitting on my desk next to that's the other thing. Besides having my work computer there, I always have my Mac nearby.
I know that we talked a bunch about the Apple Watch a while ago. They've done that recent update, which has kind of changed things. What do you think of that?
The update of the phone or of the watch itself, or of the operating system?
Well, the operating system itself. You still have the first generation. I have the first gen.
Yeah, I still have the first generation because I'm fighting the urge to get a new one. I really don't need a new one because the one I have is working well, and the upgrade in the OS for the watch is really, I think it's sped up its functionality. I love it. It's the first thing I do every morning is put it on. It keeps me moving. One of the things I love about the watch is the activity circles. Mm-hmm. And I have been known to get to the end of a day and look at the outer one for movement and realize I'm still just a few calories away from closing it, and to get out of bed and walk around my house until I complete the circle. So the system they've got there works for me. But yeah, that's
very cool. Yeah, I've noticed that I'm seeing almost no spinning anything when I'm not waiting on things as much anymore. And I think the dock, being able to press that button and have the dock pop up and just swipe through stuff to the most used apps it's changed the way that I use the watch in a way. And so I don't think I need an upgrade.
Have you? And I don't think I do either. Like I said, I kind of want one, but I've been going back and forth about getting one of the iPad Pros, and I just haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. Every time I listen to Mac Power Users, David almost pushes me over the edge to buying one. So I may have to quit listening to that show because it's going to bankrupt me. But I just can't justify getting a new watch yet because this one works so well. It does everything I need it to do. I have to ask, have you ever answered a phone call on your watch?
I have, yes.
Don't you feel a little bit Dick Tracy doing that?
I do. It's particularly good for when you're driving.
Yeah.
Because then you're not tapping and then turning on speaker mode. You're literally, your wrist's already right there in front of you, and you're still in your field of vision for proper safety driving. Yeah. And you just reach with, the hand that's on the wheel is the one that you keep there. That's the one that has the watch on. And the other one, you just kind of tap over and hit the green. And then you put both hands back at 10 and 2. Yeah. And you just keep you talk, and they can't tell.
Oh, yeah.
They don't know they are talking to you through a watch.
And I've done it a couple of times. It's also real handy if you're, if your phone's across the room, or I've done it a couple of times when I was unloading groceries from the car. So my hands were full and my phone rang, and I've just answered it on the watch. But I always feel just a little bit too Dick Tracy. I don't know if young people know who that is.
I know who that is. I'm not that young. So, Yeah. One of the things I was going to ask you, and I think this is probably unique to you with your perspective, is you get a lot of questions, or at least maybe a lot of objections from people who kind of, they're used to me and Mike Vardy and a few others who are out there, and they kind of lump us in as this, world of productivity guys who work from home, and we can order our schedule however we want to, but that's not realistic. And what is your response to that?
There's some truth to it. I think the productivity space, and I didn't really think about this, it wasn't a motivation for me in launching the podcast or anything like that, but the productivity space seems to be kind of dominated by young guys who are working for themselves and do have that kind of control over their schedule in a way that somebody like me doesn't. I mean, as a lawyer, as a partner level attorney, I do have a certain amount of control over my day-to-day schedule, but I'm not. I still have to go into an office. I still have to deal with all the things there, and a lot of my listeners are in similar kinds of positions, and so there really is. It is a different experience than someone who is working from. Because Mike Vardy and I had a conversation about this early on about, because he talks about theming your days. Yeah. And my question to him, and I wasn't challenging him. I was really trying to think through, all right, how does that work for somebody who has to go into an office or a store or wherever they work, and their days are not their own? And, he had a good answer for that. And I think, you just really have to look at, take what you can learn from you guys that are working from home and see how it can apply to your life to make your day a little easier.
Yeah. Well, so for me, the perspective is this, is I work from home, but less now than ever before. I still don't work at an office. In fact, right now I'm sitting in a co-working space talking to you.
Yeah.
And I have a commute now again, sort of. And it's not like I'm home and then move out to my office in the garage like I used to and back and forth, or can just say, hey, this is what I'm going to decide I need to do all day. I still have, because I have a day job, very much unlike Mike Vardy, who can theme his days and then it's his days and it's his business. I do the podcast on the side. I have a day job and I still have certain things that have to get done. And so I think people need to hear that. They need to hear that, look, there are expectations that your employer has of you. It is still up to you to make sure that those expectations are met. But there's a freedom still, I think, that most people don't grab hold of, which is to focus your time or chunk your time in certain ways to be most optimal towards those expectations by saying, hey, I'm going to work on such and such for most of the day or half of the day, this day and this day, because I know that, my time of day for creativity or other different functions like that is best at this time, this day, et cetera, based on, standard meetings that are plugged in that I have no control over. Anyway, you see where I'm going.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And this sort of cycles back to the intentionality thing that we talked about earlier in this conversation, that some of this comes with knowing yourself, knowing how you work, how you work best, and how you can meld that with the expectations of your employer, your clients, or your customers, however you work. So for me, for instance, this is an example. There are meetings that are planned for me that I can't do anything about, but I know myself as an introvert. I do better if I save the first thing in the morning. I have time alone to kind of think through my day and do certain things. And so when it's within my control and somebody wants to schedule a meeting, I offer them times later in the day so that I don't start out my day with a conference call that throws me off my routine for the rest of the day. Where an extrovert may like having those meetings first thing in the day because they're energized by interacting with people. So some of that just comes from knowing yourself, knowing what kind of person you are, knowing how you work best, and to the extent you can, making those adjustments to your workday to accommodate that.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I assume that you deal with that because you are, again, in an office. And so you don't necessarily get to dictate all of your time, but you have, I think what you probably do, and you can confirm this, is you probably have enough of a structure set up that it keeps you on track and keeps you moving forward at all times, but you have space and or wiggle room allowed outside of that structure for the freedom that, hey, if somebody needs you to come help them with something, a coworker example, that you're able to do that, or when you're able to do that.
Yeah, I can look at my calendar and say, here's the time I have available, or here's what I need to move, because if something urgent or important comes up that needs my immediate attention, because I've got the infrastructure in place, I can look at my calendar when someone calls me for a meeting or, wants to schedule a call or needs something from me and say, here are the windows of time I have available. Or if it's really urgent, okay, look at my calendar, I'm going to move this thing over to, tomorrow afternoon to free up the time today. I try not to let things get right down to the wire of the deadline, because anytime you do that, something's going to happen to throw off your schedule, and then you're going to miss your deadline. So it's those kinds of things, being intentional and thinking about how life really works. That you can have, as they say, the best laid plans of mice and men are oft gone astray. And so you just have to know that things come up, either interruptions happen or technology fails you and you lose time. So planning ahead for that, and whatever the external deadline is, planning to have the project done before that, so you've got some space in case the unexpected happens. All those kinds of things help us to be productive, both in the sense of checking things off our to-do list, but also in that sense of making a meaningful life, of getting the things done that really matter to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's probably a good place to land here. So I would love to direct tons of people, all of my listeners, that aren't already listening to your show. I want them to go check it out. So where can they find you and the show?
The easiest, the show's in iTunes and on Stitcher and various places, but the easiest way to find me and find the other ways of getting a hold of me would be on the website, and that's at theproductivewoman.com. And there are links there to, for email and how to find me on Twitter, and I'm in all the usual places.
Right. Awesome. Well, Laura, this has been fun. And again, we're on the same podcast network, so feel free and feel safe to step on over and listen to Laura's show as well as mine moving forward, okay? Laura, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Eric. This was so much fun.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Laura Mcclellan of theproductivewoman.com. And that's where you can go, actually, to subscribe to her show. Check out her episodes. If you're looking for another productivity podcast, there's not that many of them. There's more than there used to be, obviously. Theproductivewoman.com is where you can find her show. And I hope you also head on over to freshbooks.com/to-do and enter Beyond the To-Do List in the How Did You Hear About Us section, so you can grab your free unrestricted 30-day trial of FreshBooks, the online invoice and getting paid system. I don't know a better way of calling it anything other than that. It's the getting paid system. You get paid for doing your work, and it facilitates that. It keeps you productive and organized and makes sure you do get paid. So anyway, freshbooks.com/to-do, enter Beyond the To-Do List in the How Did You Hear About Us section and get that free 30-day trial. It's interesting to me that there's all these free 30-day trials out there for things, and I think you probably hear about it over and over and over again. Why not try it this time that you've heard it, and see if you don't get paid more and faster? Again, freshbooks.com/to-do, Beyond the To-Do List in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I have been your host, Erik Fisher, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next episode. Beyond the To-Do List is a proud member of the Noodle Mix Network. Find more of our award-winning and award-nominated podcasts to make you think, laugh, and succeed at noodle.mx.